The Enclave is one of the most notable antagonistic factions in the Fallout universe. They have played a major role in the franchise across several of the games and the TV series. The Enclave claims to be the remnants of the pre-war United States government. But, considering the actions of the US government that led to nuclear annihilation, that's not the claim to legitimacy they think it is. So, let's see who the Enclave are, and what actually happened to them after the war. Who are the Enclave? The formation of the Enclave, while unclear, goes far back before the Great War. Whether they were called a deep state, a secret government pulling the strings, or an evil, shadowy organization, rumors of their presence existed for years before the bombs fell. The existence of the faction was all but confirmed weeks before the war by two different sources. The first one was Senator Sam Blackwell, who, upon noticing misallocated budgets in the government's spending, followed the trail of money and was on the cusp of discovering the conspiracy. His search led him to Thomas Eckhart, the Secretary of Agriculture, who then blackmailed Blackwell into silence by kidnapping her daughter. Sam Blackwell later revealed the existence of this secret force behind the government in an interview with the Charleston Herald. While he didn't reveal the organization's name, it gave more credence to the existing conspiracies. The second source was Mags Vecchio, a reporter for the Boston Bugle. She was investigating the disappearance of the president, and all clues led to a Poseidon oil rig off the coast of California. An anonymous government official revealed the name of this facility as Control Station Enclave, and confirmed that the president was there for 6 months leading up to the nuclear fallout. This report was published just a week before the bombs fell, confirming the rumors and revealing the secret organization to the public. However, it was way too late by that point. The Enclave, before the war, was a group of politicians, scientists, military leaders, and corporate CEOs. Their members could only be invited into their ranks if they showed great anti-communist and fascist beliefs and had the influence or wealth to help the Enclave's cause. Several members of the government, including the president, were members of the faction before the war. As the war grew closer every day, the Enclave was preparing for its next steps, the Enclave's pre-war preparations. Unlike the faction's post-war record, the pre-war era of the Enclave did not include many direct actions and conflicts. Instead, they were preparing for the upcoming conflict by scheming for the apocalyptic environment and how they could survive and take advantage of the people. The Enclave constructed many fallout shelters across the United States for its members to survive a nuclear war. The Poseidon oil rig, Raven Rock, and White Spring Congressional Bunker were some of these facilities. Many government officials were staying in these shelters for months before the war, and some fled to their designated shelters when they were alerted to the incoming Chinese ICBMs. The darker flip of these shelters was their involvement with Vault-Tec and the vaults built for the general population. Vault-Tec's biggest contractor was the United States government, and by extension, the Enclave. Most of Vault-Tec's shelters were planned and built to run experiments on unsuspecting survivors. The experiments ranged from relatively harmless social experiments to brutal and unethical medical and scientific experiments. Vault-Tec used misleading advertisements and false promises to convince people to sign up for their local vaults, ensuring they would have plenty of victims after the bombs fell and the people could not leave. These experiments took hundreds of survivors' lives over the years, with only a few dozen surviving a vault designated for running inhumane tests. While many blame Vault-Tec as the mastermind behind the events that took place in the vaults, the Enclave might have had a bigger role in all of this than people assume. The Enclave's secret plan. It's hard to paint a clear picture of the Enclave and Vault-Tec's goals based on their actions after the war. While Vault-Tec does not appear to be directly involved in the post-apocalypse events and retreats to the shadows, the irradiated wastelands present the perfect opportunity for the Enclave to drop its mask and reveal its true intentions fully. After the war, the Enclave was the one observing most of the Vault-Tec experiments. They also embraced some of their more extreme ideologies, such as pseudoscientific theories like social Darwinism. They were openly racist against any non-Enclave humans, and especially super mutants and ghouls. Over the years, they grew more radical in their beliefs, to the point of committing genocide against non-Enclave populations as they viewed them as near-human mutants. This shift in attitude for the Enclave seems at odds with their original purpose. In 2023, Tim Kaine, Fallout's creator, released a video blog called The True Purpose of Vaults in Fallout. The video clarifies why the vaults were constructed and the Enclave's original plan for the experiments. The Enclave believed that following a thermonuclear war, Earth would be left uninhabitable by humans. They wanted to build a multi-generational spaceship that would travel across the galaxy in search of a new planet for humans to populate. The social, medical, and cryopreservation experiments were run to observe the effect of different events and outcomes to people in long-term isolation, such as a spaceship. The social experiments put vault dwellers in strange, damaging scenarios to see the outcome, with no regard for what would happen to them at the end. The medical experiments were done to develop cures and treatments on unsuspecting victims without their consent. And dozens of people were put in cryostasis for years, even more than a century, in the case of Vault 111's sole survivor, to observe what effects long durations of this type of preservation would have on the Enclave officials. These plans were hinted at long before, as early as Fallout 2. Daniel Byrd, the president of the Enclave at the time, spoke about the possibility of humans living on Mars. By this point, Daniel Byrd was completely mad, and his statements were more than incoherent ramblings. But it's possible that the idea existed among Enclave members for a long time. Even considering the Enclave's original plan does not redeem them in their actions. While they didn't want to bring about nuclear fallout themselves, they did nothing to avoid such a fate. Instead of ensuring that the Earth would still be a suitable place to live for humankind, a group of rich and powerful individuals spent their time and resources on trying to escape our planet and ignore the worsening political and environmental crisis, leaving nothing but destruction behind. Some of it does sound eerily familiar to our real world. The Enclave could not follow through on its plans once the bombs fell. So, what happened after the war? The scattering. Despite the preparations, many members of the Enclave were caught by surprise on the morning of October 23, 2077. Enclave facilities were spread across the United States, and many members of the faction were already in shelters or could make it inside the nearest one in time. However, many members, especially those who were supposed to be at White Spring Congressional Bunker, were missing or were removed from the list with no clear reason. While all Enclave facilities were equipped with hardwired communication channels between them, the White Spring Bunker was disconnected from the network shortly after the war. There were many safeguards put in place to specifically avoid the loss of communication after the war. And the only way for the bunker to be disconnected would be through sabotage by someone who knew the details and inner workings of the Enclave's communication systems. This isolated the Appalachian branch of the Enclave from the rest of the faction and led to Thomas Eckhart, the former Secretary of Agriculture, taking control of the facility and announcing himself as the President of the United States. Thomas Eckhart derailed this branch of the Enclave from its original purpose, but not in an effort to do something better and moral with the technology and equipment at their disposal. So, what were his intentions? Thomas Eckhart. Before the war, Thomas Eckhart was an ardent anti-communist. He was a vocal supporter of a preemptive nuclear strike against China, and often clashed with other Enclave members who were opposed to his ideas. Once the bombs fell, his sole goal was to take revenge against the Chinese. Even though the USA has already launched multiple retaliatory nuclear strikes, Eckhart wanted to ensure China was destroyed with more atomic missiles. He wanted to activate the automated nuclear launch pads in Appalachia, and to achieve this, he needed to trick the security system into believing the region was under attack and raise the threat level to DEFCON 1. He achieved this by experimenting with radiation and the FEV serum, creating super mutants and scorched beasts. He unleashed these monsters in the region, successfully increasing the threat level and preparing to launch the nukes. During this time, Eckhart faced a lot of opposition from Enclave members and other government officials who survived in the bunker. Other members of the United States cabinet with higher authority than him mysteriously died shortly after the war, putting him in charge from the beginning. From then on, any opposition, including military generals and Congress members, was executed if they voted against him. The last general under his command, General Santiago, was loyal to him until he unleashed the terror and destruction of super mutants and scorched beasts in Appalachia. When she tried to stand up against Eckhart, he put her in a chemically induced coma, as he still needed a general's clearance to activate the nuclear weapons. Before Thomas Eckhart could finalize his plans and launch new nuclear missiles against China months after the war, some of General Santiago's loyal soldiers revolted against him. They managed to save Santiago and stop Eckhart in his tracks. During this revolt, however, White Spring Bunker's AI system malfunctioned, recognizing any human as an invader. In the end, the AI defense system killed everyone within the bunker, ending this branch of Enclave shortly after the war and leaving the region with the dangers that Eckhart released. The Enclave Oil Rig. The Poseidon Oil Rig off the coast of California, also known as the Control Station Enclave, was the central command base of the faction following the war. They declared themselves as the remnants of the United States government and aimed to continue the Enclave's original plans. A line of presidents led the faction from the oil rig for about 70 years, possibly including the last elected president of the United States before the war. With each passing year, the Enclave grew more radical in its beliefs. They started to view anyone who was exposed to outside radiation as mutants, and only considered the members of the Enclave as pure humans. They started to develop new power armors and experimented with the dreaded Deathclaw as weapons to use against mutants. They also used mutants as slaves to do physical labor outside of the Enclave base. In 2236, the Enclave scouts discovered the ruins of the Mariposa military base. The Chemical Corps, the science division of the Enclave, began scouring the base, and the assault forces started to gather slaves from nearby settlements. The Mariposa military base was working on developing the FEV serum before the war, and working on the ruins exposed the slaves to enough of the serum that they started to mutate more over time. The excavations were done by January of 2237, and the Enclave secured a pure dose of the virus to experiment on. The slaves who were turned into super mutants by this point knew that the Enclave would kill them once they were done, so they were preparing to rise up against the Enclave forces. On the final day, the super mutants fought against the Enclave, and they were forced to evacuate and seal off the military base, trapping the super mutants inside. Frank Horrigan, one of the super mutants, was subdued and taken by the Enclave as a test subject. Frank Horrigan underwent numerous tests and experiments, and was finally trapped inside a large suit of power armor, becoming the best security force for the Enclave oil rig. The scientists also start experimenting on the FEV virus, trying to develop a chemical agent that would exterminate every mutant exposed to it. This would be a chemical weapon capable of killing anyone who was exposed to enough radiation, making it a weapon of mass destruction that would wipe out anyone except Enclave members. The agent, called FEV Curling 13, named after the scientist who worked on it, was finished by the autumn of 2242. 250,000 gallons of the agent were manufactured and were ready to be released into the jet streams. Still, the Chosen One infiltrated the oil rig just in time, assassinating President Dick Richardson and Frank Horrigan and destroying the oil rig by nuclear detonation. The Enclave was days away from committing a global genocide, killing any survivor of the Great War that they deemed as mutants. By this point, the Enclave's original plans on building a multi-generational starship were all but forgotten, instead turning them into a radical, antagonizing force that was butthurt by the mere resilience and self-determination of humanity. Retreat to Raven Rock. By late 2242, the remaining forces of the Enclave from the destroyed oil rig fled east towards the capital wasteland. Some established a base in Navarro, while John Henry Eden, the new president of the Enclave, ordered the rest to establish an outpost near the ruins of Washington, D.C. The Navarro base was fully staffed and operational for a few years. However, the new California Republic eventually deemed them a threat to the region. NCR invaded the base, and their army was victorious against the Enclave forces, ending this chapter of the Enclave by the year 2246. John Henry Eden was joined by some of the Enclave survivors from the west coast at Raven Rock. Raven Rock was still a fully operational facility, with manufacturing capabilities and stockpiles of resources available. They used the equipment to build an army of robots and weapons to maintain their technological superiority, as well as a separate line of iBots created to roam the wasteland, spreading propaganda and the message of the Enclave's return. For the next few years, the Enclave stayed in the shadows, keeping to themselves in Raven Rock and Adams Air Force Base. In the year 2277, the Enclave had gathered enough power to start expanding again. They secured a massive water purifier facility in DC's water basin and started to work on Project Purity. The Enclave planned to use the water purifier to contaminate the surrounding waters with the modified FEV virus to cleanse the wasteland of mutants. However, the facility's lead scientist, the Lone Wanderer's father, committed suicide by activating the purifier prematurely and flooding the chambers with radiation. This stopped the Enclave on their tracks, and they started to shadow the Lone Wanderer to find the missing pieces they needed to activate the water purifier. Once the Garden of Eden kit was located inside Vault 87, the Enclave possessed the item to continue the project. Colonel Autumn defied the president's wishes and refused to contaminate the waters. He believed using the water purifier to help the capital wasteland would unite the survivors and paint the Enclave as the saviors. This caused a civil war to erupt in the faction and in Raven Rock. President John Henry Eden's army of robots turned against the remaining humans who were loyal to Colonel Autumn. He still wanted to complete Project Purity by releasing the modified FEV virus, but the Enclave was finally stopped by the Brotherhood of Steel. The Capital Wasteland branch of the Brotherhood of Steel, led by Elder Lyons, used the pre-war machine, Liberty Prime, to raid the water purifier. They managed to destroy the Enclave fortifications and lay claim to the facility. The fate of Colonel Autumn remains a mystery in the aftermath of this battle. The war between the Brotherhood and the Enclave waged on. The Brotherhood managed to destroy the Enclave base at Raven Rock, forcing their members to retreat to a mobile base crawler in Adams Air Force Base. The war went back and forth, and the Enclave managed to successfully ambush the Brotherhood and destroy Liberty Prime in a satellite relay station. The Brotherhood had to retreat and regroup, while the Enclave tried to re-establish control by deploying its special forces, known as Enclave Sigma Squads, outside of the Capital Wasteland. The Lone Wanderer helped the Brotherhood rebuild a pre-war weapon, giving them back the advantage they had against the Enclave, and the final battle took place in the Adams Air Force Base, where the Lone Wanderer, with the help of the Brotherhood, managed to destroy the last remaining command base of the Enclave. The Enclave's beliefs and goals made them a target for any other faction or survivor, with any amount of humanity left in them. Even when some of the Enclave members tried to do the right thing, it was still to empower the faction's image and reputation. And while they were a powerful and influential organization before the war, they underestimated the obstacles they would face against those who survived the worst and were not about to give up in the face of a genocidal faction, the Enclave remnants. After the war with the Brotherhood, the remaining Enclave forces scattered across the United States. Their members on the West Coast either stayed hidden or were hunted down by NCR Rangers and bounty hunters. Several groups were deployed in the Commonwealth, trying to scout and establish a new base of operations in the Glowing Sea. We encounter these groups, led by Major Elias, in Fallout 4, but they were unsuccessful in their mission. The last known member of the faction in the region is Brian Richter, who was left for dead during a recon mission. He gave up his past life and fled to the Far Harbor Island, becoming a devoted zealot among the children of Adam. The Enclave survived in other isolated locations. The last known operational base of the faction was seen in the Fallout TV series, when Dr. Wilzig fled the Enclave base he was working at and set off the events of the show. The base was in an unknown snow-covered mountainous region, but the exact location and scale of the Enclave base is still unknown. Despite all the setbacks and defeats the Enclave experienced in more than 2 centuries after the Great War, they still remain as an unknown force and threat in post-war America. They are no longer the major antagonists that we faced against in Fallout 2 and 3, but there is still a chance for them to return in later installments in the franchise. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the secret escape of Fallout's last president, click the video on screen.